Don't touch anything without permission, the head housekeeper warned, her pace brisk and unforgiving. The stone corridor seemed to narrow with each step. And don't speak unless the king addresses you. His Majesty has no patience for chatter. Oh, and don't stare at him. He may be blind, but he knows when you're pitying him. Phelan's lips twitched despite herself. Is there anything His Majesty doesn't hate? Lillian stopped short, giving her a withering look. Mind your tongue. The last 3 maids were dismissed within the hour. The truth stung. Phelan had no pack, no family, no options. This job, serving the broken king no one else wanted, was her last thread of hope. They stopped before heavy wooden doors. No guards stood watch. The king's chambers felt less like a royal apartment and more like a cell at the end of the world. He's expecting you, Lillian said. The razor and basin are inside. Keep your hand steady. Before Phelan could ask what she meant, Lillian pushed her through. The lock clicked behind her with terrible finality. The chamber was darker than she'd expected, heavy curtains choking out the grey autumn light. His scent hit her first, pine smoke, leather, something wild, saturating the air until her omega instinct screamed. LYCAN. Dangerous. Submit. Then she saw him. King Conrad sat in his wheelchair near the window, broad frame draped in dark furs, face turned toward the sound of her entrance. Black cloth bound his eyes. Even seated, even blind, he radiated menace. His scarred hands rested on the chair arms with deceptive calm. Who are you? His voice was a low rumble. Phelan, Your Majesty. I'm your new. I didn't ask for a new maid. He tilted his head, tracking her. Tell me, Phelan, how long do you think you'll last? She swallowed hard. I don't know, Your Majesty, but I'll try. Silence stretched between them. Then he made a sound, not quite a laugh, more like bitter exhalation. They all say that. He gestured toward a small table where a straight razor gleamed beside a basin. You know your first task. Phelan's heart hammered. Come here, Conrad commanded, his voice soft now, which somehow made it worse. I need a shave. Her feet moved before her mind could catch up. The razor felt heavy in her trembling hand. He was blind. He couldn't see her fear, couldn't see the blade coming toward his throat. This wasn't about grooming. This was a test. The broken king wanted to know if she would run, if she would refuse, if her hands would shake so badly she'd draw blood. Phelan dipped the cloth in warm water and stepped closer to the wolf in his wheelchair. Close enough that his scent overwhelmed everything. Close enough to see the harsh line of his jaw and barely contained power. I'll be gentle, Your Majesty, she whispered, raising the blade. I promise I won't hurt you. King Conrad went utterly still. And though she couldn't see his eyes behind the blindfold, Phelan swore she felt the weight of his gaze shift, from judgment to something else entirely. Curiosity. Phelan's hands didn't shake as she pressed the warm cloth to his jaw. She'd expected them to, had braced for the tremor that would give away her terror, but somehow touching him steadied her rather than unraveling her completely. His skin was warm beneath the cloth, the muscle of his jaw tight as cable. She worked carefully, methodically, the way she'd shaved her father before the fever took him. Before everything fell apart. You're not afraid, Conrad said suddenly, his voice low and testing. I am, Phelan admitted, reaching for the razor. The truth felt safer than lies with a man who sat in darkness, listening to every breath. But fear doesn't mean I'll do a poor job, Your Majesty. She brought the blade to his throat. Conrad moved without warning. His hand shot up, catching her wrist in an iron grip. The razor froze a hair's breadth from his jugular. Phelan's heart stopped. Steady now, he growled, and she could hear the predator in it, the LYCAN testing prey. His thumb pressed against her pulse point. Your heartbeat just spiked. Why? Because you startled me, Your Majesty. She didn't pull away, didn't drop the razor. But I still won't cut you. For a long moment he held her there, blind eyes hidden behind black cloth, his grip firm enough to bruise. Then slowly, deliberately, he released her wrist and settled back into the chair. Continue. Phelan exhaled and drew the first stroke. The blade whispered against his skin, smooth and clean. She worked in silence, hyper-aware of everything, the rise and fall of his chest, the way his nostrils flared slightly as if scenting the air, the absolute stillness of a predator pretending to be prey. "The others steal from me," Conrad said quietly, startling her again. But this time she kept the blade steady. "When they think I can't see. Small things. Coins from the desk. Silver from the wash basin." Phelan moved to his other cheek. "I won't steal from you, Your Majesty." "Why not?" His voice was curious now, dangerous in a different way. "I'm blind. Helpless. Who would stop you?" She paused, meeting his blindfolded gaze as if he could see straight through to her soul. "Perhaps he could, in his own way. Because you're still a person," she said simply. "Blind or not, crippled or not, you deserve dignity. And I don't take what isn't freely given." The silence that followed felt different. Heavier. She could feel something shift in the air between them, though she couldn't name it. Conrad inhaled slowly, deeply, and Phelan realized with a flush of heat that he was scenting her. Reading her the way wolves read each other, through pheromones and truth written in biology. "Omega," he murmured, and something in his voice made her skin prickle. "You smell like honesty, like sorrow." A pause. "Like autumn rain." Phelan's hand trembled then, just once, before she steadied it. "I'm finished, Your Majesty." She stepped back, setting down the razor with a soft click. Conrad's hand rose to touch his jaw, fingers trailing over smooth skin as if verifying her work. When he lowered his hand, something almost like a smile ghosted across his mouth. "You'll return tomorrow," he said. "Not a question. A command." "Yes, Your Majesty." As she turned to leave, his voice stopped her at the door. "Phelan." The way he said her name made it sound like a secret. "Thank you." She looked back at the broken king in his wheelchair, blindfolded and still, and felt the first dangerous stirring of something she couldn't afford. Hope. Conrad waited until her footsteps faded down the corridor before reaching up to loosen the blindfold. The cloth fell away, and he blinked in the gray afternoon light, his vision sharp and clear as it had always been. Perfect sight. Perfect hearing. Perfect deception. He'd been watching her the entire time, of course. Through the gaps in the weave, through the practiced tilt of his head that suggested blindness while his eyes tracked every movement. The way her hands had trembled only once. The way she'd bitten her lower lip in concentration. The way her worn dress, mended at the seams, faded from too many washings, hung on a frame too thin for an Omega her age. She was starving. Not dramatically, not enough that others would notice, but he saw it. The slight hollow of her cheeks. The careful way she'd moved, conserving energy. And gods, she was beautiful. Sad and lovely and sincere in a castle full of vipers. Conrad pressed his fingers against his temple, guilt mixing with something far more dangerous. She'd promised not to hurt him, unaware that he was the one perpetrating violence. The violence of lies, of watching her when she believed herself unseen, of letting her think him helpless when he could snap necks with his bare hands. But he couldn't stop. Not yet. Not when his father's murderer still walked free, hidden among his own court. The door burst open without warning. Conrad had a split second to slump back into the chair, to let his head loll, to replace the blindfold. When Victor's boots struck the floor, the broken king was perfectly positioned, helpless, blind, pathetic. Still playing invalid, brother. Victor's voice dripped with false sympathy. How inspirational. Conrad kept his breathing even, his face slack. "Victor, to what do I owe the pleasure?" "Just checking on your health." His brother's footsteps circled the wheelchair like a wolf circling wounded prey. "I heard you've gone through another maid. How many is that this month?" 5? 6. "I kept this one." "Really?" Victor's tone sharpened with interest. "How curious. What's special about this one?" "Nothing." Conrad kept his voice flat, bored. "She doesn't steal. She doesn't reek of ambition. She's Tolerable. How touching. Victor leaned close enough that Conrad could smell the wine on his breath. Tell me, brother, does it hurt? Sitting in that chair, knowing you'll never walk again? Never hunt? Never take a woman to your bed? Every muscle in Conrad's body screamed to move, to stand, to put Victor's throat between his teeth. Instead, he let his head droop further. Every day, he whispered, injecting just enough brokenness into his voice. It hurts every day. Victor's laugh was sharp and satisfied. He turned to leave. And stopped. Phelan stood in the doorway, a tray of tea trembling in her hands. Her eyes, usually so carefully neutral, blazed with something Conrad had never seen from a servant. Fury. You're cruel, she said quietly, her voice shaking. He's your brother. Your king. And you mock him. Victor's eyebrows rose, amusement replacing surprise. My, the little maid has teeth. I have respect, Phelan corrected, stepping forward despite the obvious power difference. Something you seem to lack, my lord. The air went cold. Conrad's heart hammered behind his ribs. Run, he wanted to tell her. Don't draw his attention. Don't make yourself a target. But Victor only laughed, studying Phelan like she was a curious insect. How delightful. My brother finally found a loyal dog. He brushed past her, pausing at the door. Do enjoy her while you can, Conrad. Loyal things are so fragile. The door closed behind him. Phelan set down the tea with shaking hands, her earlier bravery crumbling into fear. I'm sorry, Your Majesty, she whispered. I shouldn't have. Thank you, Conrad interrupted softly, something fierce and possessive coiling in his chest. No one has defended me in a very long time. Behind his blindfold, he watched her blush spread like dawn. The following week, Conrad asked her to read to him. My eyes tire easily, he lied, gesturing toward the desk piled with correspondence. The council reports. Start with the one sealed in red wax. Phelan settled into the chair beside his wheelchair, close enough that her scent, that autumn rain and something uniquely hers, wrapped around him like a narcotic. She broke the seal carefully, her finger tracing the words as she began. Your Majesty, it is with deep concern that I report the northern villages have rejected the new grain tax. They claim, she hesitated, glancing at him. Continue, Conrad said softly. They claim that a crippled king cannot protect them from raiders, so why should they pay for his protection? Her voice dropped. I'm sorry, Your Majesty. Don't apologize for other men's cruelty. He kept his voice neutral, testing. What else does it say? She read it all. Every painful word. The doubts about his capability to rule. The whispers of his brother's superior strength. The suggestion that perhaps the throne needed a king who could stand. Others had read these same reports to him, their voices carefully editing out the worst parts, thinking him too broken to handle truth. Phelan gave him everything, raw and unfiltered. Next letter, he commanded. They worked through the pile for an hour. Bad harvests. Unpaid troops. Nobles circling like vultures. She read each disaster with the same quiet honesty, neither sugarcoating nor dramatizing. When she reached for a new document, Conrad shifted in his chair, a deliberate movement that brought his hand near hers. Their fingers brushed. Phelan went still, but she didn't pull away. Through the blindfold, Conrad watched the pulse in her throat quicken. Go on, he murmured. She resumed reading, but her voice had changed, gone softer. When she turned the page, Conrad let his hand drift again, this time settling beside hers on the armrest. Not quite touching, close enough to feel the heat of her skin. This report is from your Castellan, Phelan said, her breathing slightly uneven now. He writes that someone is stealing from the armory. Small weapons. Daggers mostly. Conrad's attention sharpened even as he maintained his casual posture. Does he suspect anyone? He has a list of. She reached for the next page at the same moment he did. Their hands collided, his larger one engulfing hers. This time, neither of them moved. Sorry, Your Majesty, Phelan whispered, but she didn't pull back. Her hand remained under his, small and warm and trembling slightly. "You're cold," Conrad said, which was a lie. She was burning. He could feel her pulse hammering against his palm. "I'm fine." "You're always fine." He ran his thumb across her knuckles, a movement he could blame on blind exploration if questioned. "Even when you're not. Why is that?" Phelan was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of years. "Because no one wants to hear that I'm not, Your Majesty. People prefer easy answers. Easy servants. I don't want easy." The words came out rougher than intended. Conrad forced himself to release her hand, to lean back, to remember that he was playing a role. "I want honest. You give me that." "I try to." "I know." Behind his blindfold, he studied the way she tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, the way her lips parted slightly as if she wanted to say something more. "That's why you'll stay. Why I need you to stay." The confession hung between them, more naked than he'd intended. Phelan's voice came soft as prayer. "I'm not going anywhere, Your Majesty." Conrad closed his eyes behind the cloth, drowning in her scent, in the weight of his deception. He was falling for her. And when she discovered the truth, it would destroy them both. The storm came without warning, rolling over the castle like divine wrath. One moment Phelan was arranging Conrad's dinner tray. The next the sky split open with lightning that turned the room white as bone. Thunder followed, a crack so loud it shook the windows in their frames. Phelan dropped the wine pitcher. It shattered against the stone floor, red liquid spreading like blood, but she barely noticed. She was frozen, both hands pressed against her mouth, eyes wide and distant. Another flash of lightning. Another bone-rattling boom. A small sound escaped her throat, animal, terrified. "Phelan." Conrad's voice cut through her panic, sharp with concern. "Phelan, breathe." But she couldn't. The storm dragged her back to another night, another thunder. The night the rogues came and her mother's screams mixed with the rain and the smell of smoke and blood. The window burst open, wind howling through the gap, sending curtains whipping like wraiths. "I can't," Phelan gasped, backing away from the opening. "I can't reach it." Conrad moved without thinking. He stood from the wheelchair, crossed the room in 3 strides, and slammed the window shut with enough force to rattle the glass. The wind died. The curtains fell limp. In the sudden stillness, Phelan stared at him with huge eyes. He'd made a mistake. A catastrophic, unforgivable mistake. "Your Majesty," she breathed. "You." "I felt the draft," Conrad said quickly, already lowering himself back into the chair with exaggerated difficulty. "Pulled myself up with the windowsill. Blind men can still feel where things are." It was a terrible lie, unconvincing even to his own ears. But Phelan was still trapped in her terror, still shaking, and perhaps that would be enough to. Thunder crashed again. She flinched so violently she nearly fell. Conrad cursed his deception, cursed his pride, cursed everything that kept him in this damned chair when she was breaking apart in front of him. "Come here," he commanded, opening his arms. Phelan hesitated for only a heartbeat before she moved, drawn by the LYCAN authority in his voice or perhaps by her own desperate need. She sank to her knees beside his wheelchair, and Conrad pulled her against his chest, his hand cradling the back of her head. "It's just noise," he murmured, his voice dropping to that low rumble that lycaness used to soothe their pack. "Just sound and light. It cannot hurt you here." They came in a storm, Phelan whispered against his chest, her words tumbling out in a rush. "The rogues who killed my family. Thunder and lightning, and I hid in the root cellar while they... I know." Conrad tightened his hold, breathing in her scent, trying to push calm into her through sheer force of will. "I know what it is to survive when everyone else falls." She tilted her head up, tears tracking down her face. "The assassination. They killed my father in front of me. Cut him down while I stood there, too slow to stop it." The confession tore out of him, raw and real. "They left me half dead. Sometimes I wish they'd finished the job." Don't say that, Phelan said fiercely, her hand fisting in his shirt. Don't you dare. You're still here. You're still fighting. Am I? Conrad looked down at her. Really looked, forgetting for a moment that he was supposed to be blind. Or am I just hiding? The storm raged outside, but here in his arms, Phelan had stopped shaking. You're surviving, she said softly. That's enough. That's everything. Conrad's thumb traced her cheekbone, wiping away a tear. They were too close. This was too real. Stay with me tonight, he said, the words escaping before wisdom could stop them. Just stay until the storm passes. Phelan nodded against his chest, and Conrad held her through the thunder, hating himself for every lie while savoring every moment of her trust. Phelan arrived early the next morning, carrying fresh linens and a basin of warm water. The storm had passed, leaving the world washed clean and gleaming under weak autumn sunlight. She expected to find Conrad still asleep, or perhaps already positioned in his wheelchair by the window as he usually was. Instead, she found boot prints. They tracked across the floor from the window to the center of the room, pressed into the thin layer of mud that yesterday's storm had blown through the briefly opened shutters. Large prints, the stride long and confident, the tread deep, suggesting weight and purpose. Phelan froze in the doorway, the linens forgotten in her arms. The prints led from the window, the same window Conrad had crossed the room to close last night, back to where his wheelchair now Saturday. Perfectly positioned, perfectly still, as if it had never moved. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She looked toward the bedroom door, listening. Conrad's breathing came steady and slow from beyond, the rhythm of deep sleep, or the rhythm of someone pretending to sleep. Phelan set down the linens with trembling hands and knelt beside the prints. She placed her own foot next to one. His boot was easily twice the size of her worn shoe. She traced the edge of the print with one finger, following the path backward. From the wheelchair, to the window, to the wardrobe, to the bookshelf. He'd been walking, not just last night in his moment of panic, but regularly. The prints were layered, some older and faded, some fresh from last night. He'd been walking while she slept, while the castle slept, while everyone believed him broken. The king could walk. The king could see. She remembered now the way his hand had found hers so precisely when they read together. The way he'd reached for the window without fumbling. The way his blindfolded gaze seemed to track her movements. Phelan should feel betrayed. Should feel used. Should march into his bedroom and demand the truth. Instead, she understood. A king doesn't pretend to be crippled without reason. A king doesn't hide his strength unless he's hunting something, or someone, who thinks him weak. She thought of Victor's cruel visit, the way he'd circled Conrad like a predator assured of his dominance. She thought of the stolen weapons from the armory, the whispered rebellions in the northern villages. Conrad wasn't hiding from his enemies. He was drawing them out. And if Phelan exposed him now, she'd ruin whatever trap he was setting. She fetched a cloth from the wash basin and began scrubbing the floor, erasing each boot print with careful precision. The mud came up easily, leaving the stone clean and unmarked. Evidence destroyed. Secret kept. When Conrad emerged from his bedroom an hour later, wheeling himself through the doorway with that same carefully helpless expression, Phelan greeted him with her usual quiet courtesy. "Good morning, Your Majesty. I've brought your breakfast." He tilted his blindfolded face toward her voice. "You're here early. The storm made a mess. I wanted to clean before you woke." She poured his tea with steady hands, watching him in her peripheral vision. "I hope you slept well." Something shifted in his expression, too subtle for most to catch, but Phelan had learned to read him. Surprise. Wariness. A question. "Well enough," he said slowly. "And you? No more nightmares?" "No, Your Majesty." She set the teacup within his reach, close enough that his fingers wouldn't have to search. "I felt safe. Thank you for that." Conrad's hand found the cup without fumbling. "Phelan." "Your porridge is getting cold," she interrupted gently, and smiled at him even though he supposedly couldn't see it. "Eat, Your Majesty." You need your strength. Behind his blindfold, she would have sworn she saw his eyes widen. But he said nothing, just nodded slowly, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. And Phelan knew, with the certainty of instinct, that she'd just chosen a side in a war she barely understood. She only hoped she'd chosen right. The man found Phelan in the laundry, where steam rose from the washing vats and obscured the corners in mist. He appeared like a shadow-given form, tall, lean, with the cold eyes of someone who'd done terrible things and slept soundly after. "You're the king's maid," he said without preamble. Not a question. Phelan's hands stilled in the soapy water. She recognized him from the great hall, Raphael, Victor's beater, the one who stood at the prince's right hand like a trained hound. "I am. How fortunate." He moved closer, his smile sharp as a blade. "I have a proposition for you." Every instinct screamed at her to run. Instead, Phelan lifted her chin. "I'm not interested in propositions. Not even ones that come with gold." Raphael produced a leather purse, heavy with coin. He set it on the washing table with a dull thunk. More money than a little Omega maid would see in 5 years. Maybe 10. Phelan stared at the purse. That much gold could buy her freedom. Could buy her passage to the southern territories where Omegas lived without fear. Could buy her a life beyond these walls. "What would I have to do?" she heard herself ask. Raphael's smile widened. "Simple task. The king drinks wine each evening. Yes? You serve it to him." Her blood turned to ice. "Yes." This, he produced a small vial from his cloak, the liquid inside black as tar. "Goes into his cup tomorrow night. He'll fall asleep. Won't wake up. No pain. Quite merciful, really. You want me to poison him? I want you to be practical." Raphael pushed both the purse and the vial toward her. "The king is already broken. You'd be ending his suffering. And Prince Victor is generous to those who serve him well. When he takes the throne, and he will, you'll have a place of honor, protection, wealth." Phelan's hands shook as she reached for the purse. The gold was real, solid, heavy with promise. The vial was cold against her palm. "Tomorrow night," she whispered. "Tomorrow night." Raphael's hand closed over hers, pressing the vial deeper into her grip. "Don't disappoint us, little Omega. We're not kind to those who refuse." He left as silently as he'd come, disappearing into the steam. Phelan waited until his footsteps faded completely. Then she ran. Conrad was reviewing reports when she burst into his chambers, breathless and wild-eyed. He looked up sharply, his blindfolded face turning toward her with uncanny precision. "Phelan? What?" She dropped to her knees before his wheelchair, pressing both the purse and the vial into his hands. "Victor sent his man. Raphael. He gave me these. Told me to poison your wine tomorrow night." Silence. Absolute and terrible. "You took them," Conrad said, his voice carefully neutral. But his hands had gone white-knuckled around the vial. "I took them so I could bring them to you." Phelan looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. Did you honestly think I would?" Conrad's hand shot out, catching her face between his palms. The purse and vial clattered to the floor, forgotten. Behind his blindfold, she knew he was staring at her with those gray eyes that could see everything. "No," he said fiercely. "No, I knew you wouldn't. But gods, Phelan, they could have killed you for refusing. They still might. Then we tell them I did it." Her hands covered his, holding him to her. "We pretend. You pretend to be poisoned. We draw them out. We." "You're not alone in this anymore," Phelan said, her voice steady despite the fear. "Whatever you're planning, whatever trap you're setting, I'm with you. I choose you." Conrad pulled her up, into his lap, his arms crushing her against his chest. She felt him shaking, felt something like a sob caught in his throat. "You magnificent, terrifying, impossible woman," he breathed against her hair. "You're going to get us both killed." "Or we'll win," Phelan whispered back. "Or we'll win." Conrad had planned to reveal himself at the next full moon, when the court assembled for the traditional hunt. A dramatic moment. A controlled environment. Time to position his loyal guards and isolate Victor's supporters. Victor gave him 3 days. The summons came at dawn, delivered by Raphael himself with barely concealed satisfaction. Prince Victor requests your presence in the courtyard at midday, Your Majesty. A matter of urgent state business. The entire court will be assembled. Conrad kept his voice level, bored. Tell my brother I'm indisposed. I'm afraid he insists. Raphael's smile was all teeth. He said to tell you that if you cannot even attend court, perhaps you cannot rule it either. The nobles are concerned about the kingdom's future. The threat was clear. Come and be humiliated publicly, or be declared unfit in absentia. Either way, Victor would have his opening to seize the throne. When Raphael left, Conrad tore the blindfold off and hurled it across the room. He knows. Somehow he knows we're planning something. Phelan retrieved the blindfold from where it had landed. Or he's simply impatient. She turned it over in her hands, studying the black cloth that had been his mask for months. Will you wear it today? I have to. The admission tasted like ash. If I reveal myself now, without proof of his treason, it looks like deception. Like I've been lying to my people. Victor will spin it as madness, paranoia. He'll say I've been hiding because I'm unstable, unfit. Then we play his game. Phelan moved to him, rising on her toes to tie the blindfold back into place. Her fingers were gentle against his temples. One more time. Let him think he's won. Conrad caught her wrists. If this goes wrong. It won't. Phelan. I trust you, she said simply, and pressed a kiss to his jaw. Brief. Tender. Devastating. The courtyard was packed when midday arrived. Every noble, every guard, every servant who could find an excuse to attend had assembled. They lined the walls, filled the galleries, pressed close to see the broken king wheeled out like a curiosity. Phelan pushed the wheelchair with steady hands, though Conrad could feel her fear in the slight tremor of her grip on the handles. Victor waited at the center of the courtyard, positioned like a king already, with Raphael and a dozen armed men at his back. Brother, Victor's voice rang out, false warmth dripping from every syllable. How good of you to join us. I know travel is difficult for you. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Cruel. Mocking. Conrad kept his head bowed, his body slack. Every instinct screamed at him to stand, to fight, to show them what he was. But not yet. Not yet. You summoned me, Conrad said quietly. I'm here. Indeed. Victor began to pace, playing to the crowd. I've called this assembly because I can no longer watch my beloved brother suffer in silence. Look at him. Blind. Crippled. Barely able to care for himself. He turned to face the assembled nobles. Is this a king? Can a man who cannot walk protect our borders? Can a man who cannot see judge justice fairly? Murmurs of agreement. Victor had planted his supporters well. I propose, Victor continued, his voice rising with practiced passion, that for the good of the realm, King Conrad step down voluntarily. Let him live out his days in comfort and peace while someone capable takes the burden of rule. Someone like you? Conrad asked softly. Victor's smile was triumphant. Someone like me. Phelan's hand found Conrad's shoulder. A warning. A plea. Not yet. Very well, Conrad said, and let defeat color his voice. If the court wills it. Victor's eyes gleamed with victory. He'd miscalculated, and he was about to discover exactly how badly. Victor raised his hand, a casual gesture that might have meant nothing. But Conrad saw the archers on the parapets shift, saw them knock arrows, saw the trajectory lines that would end with his body pierced and bleeding on the cobblestones. He'd been so focused on the political trap that he'd missed the simpler, bloodier solution. Victor was going to kill him. Here. Now. In front of everyone. And claim it was an assassination attempt by unknown enemies. Tragic proof that the kingdom needed a stronger king. Conrad's muscles tensed, ready to move, but Victor wasn't done. "Before we proceed," Victor announced, his voice carrying across the hushed courtyard, "there's one more matter to address. A matter of treason." He turned, pointing directly at Phelan. This woman, this Omega maid, was discovered with poison intended for the king's wine. She conspired with foreign agents to murder her own liege. Guards, seize her. The lie was brilliant. Monstrous and brilliant. If Conrad defended her, he'd look like a blind fool bewitched by a pretty face. If he stayed silent, they'd execute her while he watched, helpless. Phelan's sharp intake of breath was the only sign of her fear. "That's not true." "Silence, traitor." Raphael strode forward, his hand on his sword. 2 guards moved with him, advancing on Phelan with grim purpose. Conrad felt her hand tighten on his shoulder. Felt her start to step back, putting herself between him and the approaching men even though she had no weapon, no defense, nothing but her body and her courage. The guard raised his gauntleted fist to strike her down. Time crystallized into perfect clarity. Conrad's hand shot up, catching the guard's wrist mid-swing. The man grunted in shock as iron fingers crushed his bones. Then Conrad stood, rising from the wheelchair with fluid grace, with predatory power, with the full strength of an LYCAN who had been waiting months for exactly this moment. The blindfold came off in his other hand, torn away and cast aside. His grey eyes blazed as they swept the courtyard, no longer hidden, no longer pretending. The guard he held dangled a foot off the ground, whimpering. The silence was absolute. "You were saying, brother?" Conrad's voice cut through the shock like a blade. "Something about a crippled king." Victor's face went white, then red, then purple with rage. You can walk." "I can walk." Conrad released the guard, who crumpled to the ground. He took a step forward, then another, rolling his shoulders like a fighter entering the ring. "I can see. I can hear every treasonous word you've whispered in the dark. And I've been waiting, Victor. Waiting for you to reveal yourself completely. This is madness." Victor appealed to the watching nobles. "He's been deceiving us all. Lying to the court. He's unstable, unfit." "I was hunting a traitor," Conrad interrupted, his voice carrying absolute authority. "The man who murdered our father. The man who hired assassins to kill me and leave me for dead. The man who just tried to execute an innocent woman to cover his crimes." He turned to face his brother fully. "Hello, Victor. Did you think I wouldn't figure it out?" Victor's hand moved in that signal again. The archers drew their bows. But Conrad had spent months positioning his own people. Captain Dorian and 20 loyal swordsmen stepped from the crowd, arrows already trained on the hostile archers. They'd been waiting too. "Stand down," Conrad commanded, his LYCAN voice resonating with power that made even the hostile guards hesitate. "Or I'll consider every drawn bow an act of treason. Your choice ends now." The archers lowered their weapons. All except 2, Victor's personal guards, too loyal or too stupid to surrender. They loosed their arrows straight at Conrad's heart. Phelan screamed his name. Conrad moved like water, like violence, catching one arrow mid-flight and dodging the other. It whistled past his ear, close enough to draw blood. The courtyard erupted into chaos. And the broken king smiled. Victor drew his sword with a roar of fury, and his remaining loyalists followed suit. A dozen men against Conrad and his guards, but numbers meant nothing when LYCAN King finally unleashed the power he'd been restraining for months. Conrad moved like a storm given form. He caught the first attacker's blade bare-handed, twisted it free, and drove the pommel into the man's skull. 2 more came at him from the sides. He ducked under one strike, swept the legs from under the second, and was already moving before they hit the ground. "Protect the king." Captain Dorian's voice rang out, but Conrad needed no protection. He needed blood. He needed justice. Victor lunged for him, their blades meeting with a shriek of steel. "You deceived everyone," Victor snarled, forcing their hilts together. "Your own people." "I deceived traitors," Conrad growled back, shoving him away with inhuman strength. "And found them." They circled each other while chaos raged around them. Raphael fell to Dorian's sword. The hostile archers surrendered. But Victor fought with desperate fury, knowing this was his last stand. "She'll never forgive you." Victor spat, his sword whistling toward Conrad's throat. "Your precious little Omega. You lied to her, used her." Conrad parried, riposted, and sent Victor's sword spinning from his grip. His blade found his brother's throat, pressed just deep enough to draw a single drop of blood. "Yield," Conrad commanded. Victor's eyes burned with hate, but he sank to his knees. "I yield." Guards swarmed forward, dragging Victor away in chains. The courtyard fell silent except for the groans of the wounded and the ragged breathing of men who'd fought for their king. Conrad turned, searching for Phelan. She stood exactly where he'd left her, beside the empty wheelchair. Her face was pale, her expression unreadable. As their eyes met, truly met, with no blindfold between them, something in her gaze broke his heart. She turned to leave. "Phelan, wait," Conrad started forward, but she was already walking, her small frame disappearing into the crowd of stunned courtiers. He followed, shoving through nobles who tried to congratulate him, ignoring Dorian's concerned calls. He caught up to her in the corridor beyond the courtyard, empty and echoing. "Phelan, please. You lied to me." Her voice was quiet, devastated. "Every day, every moment I cared for you, worried for you, defended you, you were watching me, testing me." Yes. There was no point in denying it. Conrad moved around to face her, blocking her path. "I lied. I tested you. I tested everyone because I couldn't trust anyone. And now?" Tears streamed down her face. Was any of it real? Or was I just another servant to evaluate? Conrad dropped to his knees. Not forced this time. Not pretending weakness. But kneeling by choice, making himself vulnerable before the woman who'd shown him more truth than anyone in his cursed court. "It was real," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Gods, Phelan, it was real. I started by testing you, yes. But you," he caught her hands, pressing them to his face. "You treated me with dignity when others saw only a broken thing. You read me truth when others fed me lies. You defended me when you had everything to lose. And somewhere in all that deception, you taught me to see again. Not with my eyes, with my heart." "Conrad." "I tested my staff," he continued, the words tumbling out desperately, "and found traitors and thieves and cowards. But you, I found you. And you were the only real thing in a palace full of lies. Stay, please. Not as my maid. Not as my subject. Stay as..." "As what?" She was crying openly now. "As my queen," Conrad breathed. "As my mate. As the woman who saved me when I'd forgotten how to be saved." Phelan sank to her knees before him, their foreheads touching, their hands clasped between them. "You're an idiot," she whispered. "I know. A lying, manipulative, impossible idiot. I know. And I love you anyway." Conrad pulled her into his arms, crushing her against him, breathing in her scent, autumn rain and honesty and home. "I love you too," he murmured into her hair. "My queen. My truth. My Phelan." Above them, through the window, autumn leaves scattered in the wind like blessings.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this story. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to my channel for more werewolf romance tales, LYCAN Kings, rejected mates, and powerful Omega stories. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Leave a comment below telling me where you are watching from and your thoughts on Phelan and Conrad's story and what kind of werewolf stories you'd like to see next. Your support means everything and helps me create more content like this. Thank you for listening and I'll see you in the next. Your hopeless romantic Amara.